So zero product property means that we're going to take each group and set it equal to 0. And then you just solve these like a normal one-step equation. Oh, okay, -4. So x is -4. Add 3 to both sides. X is 3. So when it says solve by factoring, we usually start with GCF. When we're factoring, the GCF here is 1. And then we also need to notice that A is equal to 1. So that means that I'm going to do basic factoring, where I need two things that multiply to C and add to B. So two things that multiply to -8 that add to 2, and that would be x plus 4, x minus 2 equals 0. Then we do zero product property. We set each one equal to 0, and we solve. So for this problem with solving by factoring, we actually need to use the AC method. 3 times 15 is 45. Two things that multiply to 45 that add to -14, the B, which would be -9x and -5x. So I write my four terms, 3x squared minus 9x minus 5x plus 15 equals 0. When we have four terms, we use factor by grouping. And then I'm going to divide both of these by the GCF of 3x. So that comes outside, and I see what's left. I'd have x minus 3. Then the GCF in the next one, it's actually 5, but I'm going to take out -5 so that I still end up with the x minus 3, and I have those twins there. So then I write 3x minus 5, x minus 3 equals 0. This is zero product property, where we set each group equal to 0. And I solve them, so I add 5. 3x equals 5, divide by 3, and I can leave my answer as 5/3. Add 3 to both sides, and x equals 3. And there are no word problems on this test, so you can skip number 4. So for number 5, when you take the square root of each one, you can't take the square root of a negative. Your calculator will give you like a domain error or syntax error or something like that. So it's no real solutions. We can put the no solution symbol, but I need you to know it's no real solutions. So when we're solving for these x's, you need to isolate the x squared, just like you would normally with an x. So we do the plus 121 first. You don't divide first. It's like PEMDAS backwards. 64x squared equals 121. Divide both sides by 64. You do not need to actually divide that. Those are both perfect squares. So when you get 121 over 64, and then you take the square root of it, x is going to equal plus or minus 11 over 8. In your calculator, you can actually type that in your calculator. It'll give you that answer. So in this one, we're going to isolate x again. So we're going to add 10 to both sides. We get 2x squared equals 74. Divide both sides by 2, and x squared equals 37. And then we take the square root of each side, and that's not. So x then is approximately, when we round that to the plus or minus 6.1. So for this one, you can't do anything before you get rid of that squared. It's what you have to do first. So we end up with 2x plus 1, because the square and the square root cancel, equals, and when we take the square root of 25, that's plus or minus 5. So we actually need two equations. One of them is going to be 2x plus 1 equals 5, and the other is 2x plus 1 equals -5. And then we solve these like normal. So we get 2x equals 4, divide by 2, and x is 2. And the next one, we subtract 1 from both sides, so 2x is -6, divide by 2, and x is -3. You do not need that word problem, number 9, for the test. So in order to solve a quadratic equation using the quadratic formula, we need everything equal to 0. So I like to keep the x squared positive, so I would move this 8x. And I would put it right in the middle to keep everything in standard form. So x squared minus 8x minus 9 equals 0. And now my a is 1, my b is -8, and my c is -9. From there, I use the quadratic formula, -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So -b would be -8, so that's +8, plus or minus the square root of -8 squared, which is 64, minus 4 times 1 times -9. I noticed already that those two negatives are going to make that a positive instead of a minus in there. So all over 2a, so 2 times 1, which is 2. So 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 plus, because of the two negatives, 36 all over 2. Well, the square root of 64 plus 36 is the square root of 100, so that's all going to become 10. So I'm going to rewrite that. 8 plus or minus 10 all over 2. From there, I need two expressions, 8 plus 10 divided by 2, and 8 minus 10 divided by 2. 18 divided by 2 is 9, and negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. So my answer is x equals 9 and negative 1. So with the discriminant actually tells us how many real solutions there are. We're not calculating, we're not solving for x. We're finding out how many solutions this could have, which is either going to be 0, 1, or 2. And so using the discriminant formula is b squared minus 4ac. That's what's underneath the square root, not including the square root. So I still do the a is 8, b is 9, c is 5, and I'm calculating b squared is 81 minus 4 times a, which is 8, times c, which is 5. And 8 times 5 is 40, times 4 is 160, so this is 81 minus 160. And without even finishing to figure out what that number is, because I don't care, I know that my answer is going to be negative. And so you need to memorize that chart. If it's negative, your answer is going to be no solution. If you get 0, your answer is going to be it has one solution. And if you get a positive number, your answer is going to be that it has two solutions. So the final answer on this one is no real solutions.